Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Christian Stenner.
And I'm Katie Graham.
We're here to talk to you about one of the most iconic caves that we have here in Canada, Castleguard Cave.
Also the most soul-crushing.
It definitely has its moments. So here we have an image of the entrance of Castleguard, and it's a pretty special place, as you can see in the winter. We also have a drawing. What can you tell us about that?
Tyler and Nice drew this when we came out this year after our expedition. So he's only American on this year's trip. It was super cool to have him in there. And he's also the youngest one on our trip.
Yeah, lucked out to join the Castleguard trip and got to the back of the cave, which we'll talk about a bit more, but it's a pretty awesome place to go. So with that in mind, we're going to tell you a little bit about Castleguard Cave over this presentation. We'll talk a bit about the history and the most recent expedition. But to whet your appetite, we're going to go back in time a little bit, back to 1973, and show you a bit of video.
Castleguard, rising over 10,000 feet through the tangled ice fields of Banff National Park in Alberta. Most parties who take the 8 hours to ski across 15 miles of mountain tundra and glacier come here for the view. A few more intrepid men come to challenge Castleguard, to explore its craggy face and edge their way to its summit. These men are yet another breed. They too will challenge the mountain, not to climb up it, but to climb into it. This will be their third attempt.
All right. So for some people who've been around a while, you might recognize one of the fellows in the video, the one with the awesomest beard. That's Dr. Derek Ford, one of the greatest speleologists of our time. And he is very intertwined with the history of Castleguard, which we'll talk a little bit about. But first, to give you an idea of where we are. This is the map of, here's Canada and Alberta, and here's our dot showing the cave. So if we actually zoom in on that, we'll see that we are in the mountainous areas of Alberta. And keeping going here, we are close to the Alberta-British Columbia border, but not quite across it. Which park is it in, Katie?
So we're just in the most northern boundary of Banff National Park, and just a little bit, like one mountain north of this, is the Great Divide, so where the water starts to flow east, west, and north.
Awesome. So the area those fellows were skiing across was the Saskatchewan Glacier. So if you can follow the mouse here, they actually have to come up here, go up a moraine through the Castleguard Meadows, and then to the entrance to the cave, which is the dot that we have there. All right. So back to our regularly scheduled presentation. So yeah, it's definitely an iconic place. And part of the reason is this alpine setting. So it's 21 kilometers long, the cave. And I mean, compared to most caves of the world, that's not really that long, is it?
No, but that's good for us. And a lot of it is that 21-kilometer ski to get there.
Yeah, but here's the current actually view of the cave, and what makes it so incredible is where it goes. So it's going underneath the alpine forest and into the mountainous area, not quite under the summit of Mount Castleguard, but the terminus part of the cave actually is underneath the Columbia ice field. And that's an incredibly unique thing. I think at one time, the cave, if you could get to the back of the cave, that was the furthest from an entrance you could be. You know, obviously nowadays there's other caves with many entrances and longer passages, but for us, Castleguard is certainly iconic, and part of it's that alpine setting. So Dr. Derek Ford and his team from McMaster University were quite famous in caving circles, and they were the initial explorers of the cave. So I really like this article. I don't know if nowadays you would call a cave a big tough baby, but I guess back then that was that was what they called things. So the news obviously came out with a bit of an article, Jasper area, talking about the cave. Now they knew that the cave had been known about before this. So this was in 1967 when the explorations started. It was really interesting, actually. One of the issues they had was a few of the Dr. Ford's team were trapped when part of the entrance of the cave flooded with water. So they didn't know that that was a thing that could happen at the time, but it did. And since then, we've had to explore the cave in winter only. So one of the things, the first obstacle actually is a 24-foot pitch. So that's where they knew that most people probably had never been down that before Dr. Ford's team started exploring. So here's a still shot from, this is actually from the time the video was being filmed. So you can kind of see that first thing. At the bottom of that, you kind of go into one of the neat places of the cave called the ice crawls. So in winter, this is kind of a neat place because you slide along the ice and you can sort of get on your back and push across the ceiling, and it can be pretty neat place to be. So that was one of the things that actually was kind of better in the winter, I think, right? In the summer, it would be flopping around in wetsuits to crawl through this. Doesn't sound that pleasant, but anyways, one of the most famous passages is this textbook example of a phreatic tube called the subway. So it goes 500 meters. I don't know what that is in miles. We're not quite half a mile, but
close enough.
Yeah, it's long. It's long, and it's called the subway because it's kind of like a subway tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Yeah, so awesome example of phreatic passage. And then we have other really neat passages. So these are photos that were taken from the 70s and Derek Ford's explorations. The one on the left is called Holes in the Floor. So you have this area of the cave where you sort of have to jump across these holes, and they just kind of they're like, nightmare pits that you wouldn't want to fall down. And then really neat part of the cave is this Vadose section. There's a couple long sections called the fissures where we have kilometers of passage where we're just sort of bridging in a canyon. And you could be high in the canyon, you could be low in the canyon. It's sort of wherever you can get your best footing. And then, yeah, one of the most awesome things I think would have been to be a cave explorer and to get to the back of the cave. And it was Mike Boone who sort of did this. He was the first person to reach the ice plug, where you're sort of at the base of the Columbia ice field. So he did a remarkable 9-day solo trip, which they couldn't talk about in that movie because he didn't have Parks Canada's permission. And as the story goes, when he discovered the ice plug and told the rest of the crew, they didn't believe it. So an amazing thing to sort of be the first to see that. I'm sure it would have been for Mike Boone. And then when the other explorers came back, so this is a photo of Pete Thompson from the early 1970s when they actually went back and photographed it. Yeah, so he had to somehow levitate up a thing that got called Boone's Avon on his solo trip. I don't know how that happened. It was like a 9 meters climb. Yeah, remarkable. One of the other remarkable things about Castleguard, cubic cave pearls, very rare cave formation that exists kind of close to Camp 2, actually is. So it's fairly deep in the cave. So there's 3 camps that have been established over exploration. But yeah, well, I don't know, what can we say about the pearls, Katie?
So if we flip to the next slide, so they removed 3 pearls out of that bed and looked at it through an electron microscope. And so they came up, it starts out as a normal pearl, but then starts to get the cubic layers on there. So there is 5 caves in the world with cubic pearls. So this isn't the only place with them, but the theory is that they're actually growing in place so that they're stacked like a blocks of sugar cubes and growing together like that. But the thing that doesn't make a lot of sense is that they have to be stacked like sugar cubes to get like that. So how did they get stacked if they started round? Doesn't quite make sense, but we don't really know right now. But so they were stacked like sugar cubes and they formed like pearls, and then at some point so they would have grown when it was dry, and then at some point it started dripping, and then those pearls got scattered around. So they didn't grow in the pile as we see them today. But that's kind of all we know.
Right. The real question, how do they taste?
Delicious.
I wouldn't want to be the one to remove those because I think Parks Canada might have an issue. All right, so here's a side view of the cave in red, so you can kind of see where it goes from the Castleguard Meadows area on the right-hand side and goes up. So it has this constant sort of 4 degrees upward slope following the dip. Yeah, so, well, what can we say? I mean, we have to sort of move things along, but there was a lot of work done in Castleguard. One of the biggest expeditions, it had 45 people, was in 1984. So they actually had lost a lot of the original survey notes and information and had to basically resurvey the main trunk route of the cave. So they did that. They did a lot of work there, and that sort of produced most of what we see here on the map. So from basically when Derek Ford's team went through to the early 2000s, most of the cave had been explored. There's a couple leads in the back here and there and different things. But one of the areas which was really intriguing is a sump, which is actually about 1 kilometer from the entrance, and it's sort of highlighted in blue. It was actually pushed in 1987. So Keith Sawatsky and John Pollock attempted the dive there, got 125 meters after about what they estimated was a 20-meter drop down. And they got a little bit of a ways in. And then it sort of went away, I guess. There wasn't a lot of interest for a while.
They kind of met the limits of their open circuit equipment, and I think their balls shriveled up, and so they just let it sit there for a little while and worked on some kind of lower hanging fruit. And then Martin Groves heard about this dive project over beers in Europe somewhere, and somehow got it in his head that he wanted to come dive this thing.
Right on. So yeah, he took it on, and honestly, that really revived interest for a lot of us here, even locally. So he came over 2009 and 2010. He did 2 expeditions supported by Alberta Speleological Society and a crew of cavers he brought over from the UK. And he dove the sump, and over those 2 years of exploration, he actually cracked it. So using now the new technology, obviously a closed circuit rebreather, he was able to get through an 845-meter sump, and that's his picture after successfully cracking it. He's kind of cracking a smile. I don't know.
That's about as good as you're gonna get out of him. Yeah.
Yeah, but he was a happy camper after that because he surfaced and there was an open dry passage just waiting. And it was kind of a neat thing because that whole area of Castleguard Meadows is theorized to have another sort of parallel cave. And could this sump, the blue part here, be the connection to the rest of the system, which is, who knows? This napkin drawing was sort of done by Martin. He's really good at these sort of like Microsoft Paint diagrams. He has a PhD, by the way. Anyways, so yeah, it was kind of based on Chris Smart's hydrology studies that show dye tracing that might come from that Meadows area. So yeah, it was interesting. He planned to come back in 2012 with 2 divers so they could push the dry passage. However, our team, when we got to the cave, found that ice crawl that I talked about earlier, frozen shut to the ceiling. So we could not chop through it, even with the use of a gas-powered chainsaw. And that was kind of the end of 2012.
So since then, the ice crawls have started to be a problem since 1995, but they're becoming increasingly more of a problem, and we just kind of wanted to understand that better. So this is a engineering feat made of irrigation tube, plexiglass, and the bed frame pulled out of the garbage and repurposed, and then installed with a wildlife camera on the inside. So Greg, who's showing installing it here, so we put that in, and it's taking 4 pictures a day, year round. And then we installed a ruler on the opposite side of the wall so that we can watch the ice rise and fall throughout the season. But we have to make this thing bulletproof enough that it can handle the summer flow from a glacier that is able to rise up an 8-meter pitch and out the exit. So so make this housing and just crossed our fingers that we would get some usable images. We also put a partner wildlife camera on the outside of the cave, and so that we could try and correlate that. So this is the outside. It snows and it melts, it snows and it melts, ooh, and it melts away. And then we got a flood pulse, a flood pulse, flood pulse, flood pulse. And then the snow comes back. Woo, that's super quick. That's a year, really fast. But we learned from that. So we had so this is the data that we pulled from there, showing a few flood events in the height of summer, so that's kind of predictable. We also learned that snow came and never melted again in September. So kind of cool, and now we've got a couple more years data to add on to this, which is sort of fun. Okay, so now we get to this year. So this is just skiing up the Saskatchewan Glacier. This is in good weather. It's a really nice place to be. This is a kiwi on a mountain. Good thing I don't have a beard. Like, gross.
Yeah, so the Australians and Tom there from New Zealand came up, but the Australians actually that came had never been in temperatures below -10 degrees Celsius.
No, as we
learned, like when they actually arrived.
When we packed up and we were driving out, they kept like going like, "Oh, now this is the coldest I've ever been. Oh, now this is the coldest I've ever been." My spidey senses go, "Oh boy, we are in for it."
They suffered through it.
Yeah. Because you can't really explain what -30 feels like to someone until you just feel it. So, and here we get to, okay, so we all get up there. We've flown, so people have flown from across the world and from multiple places in North America, and we all hauled all our stuff up there, and lo and behold, those goddamn ice crawls are full to the ceiling. Not full to the ceiling, but they're not passable. So the one technology advancement that we've had since previous was the advent of a battery-powered chainsaw. So previously using a gas-powered chainsaw, which is how you would make an ice sculpture if you wanted to. They just like gave themselves carbon monoxide poisoning. So now we can use battery power and actually have some pretty good success. So this is Tyler. So this is our artist in action in the ice crawls.
So it was about 2 days of chopping ice.
2 days of chopping ice. Now you can kind of pick up on how much air is coming through here. And he's got his ski goggles on there. Yeah, so 2 days of chopping, a little bit of chainsaw action, hatchets, chisels, kind of anything. But we dug out about 15 meters of ice and made it really easily passable. So then finally we could get to hauling scuba tanks. That's what we came here for, to get these divers in the water. The Aussies partnered with 2 days of chiseling ice, and Harry came to me and said, "Are you supposed to warm up in your sleeping bag at night?" Because it would seem that he never stopped shivering. But then when they saw the sump, they finally got excited, and they're like, "Goddamn Canadians!" We're like, "You guys made us come here. Goddamn Australians."
Yeah. I don't know if we mentioned Tom Crisp already from New Zealand. He's one of the divers.
Yeah,
who are the Australians?
So this is Tom Crisp,
Yeah.
and this is Richard Harry Harris. So he was the anesthesiologist in the Thai cave rescue, and he just recently started making a podcast called Real Risk.
Mm-hmm.
And where is Craig Shallon?
Craig's
is right here. So he was also critical. So on the Thai cave rescue. So Harry's an anesthesiologist, and so he was the one putting the kids in the K-hole. And then Craig is a veterinarian, so he was making sure the kids were still in the K-hole halfway out. So this is just a little bit of once they got in the water, what they saw. And I think the beeping means that the rebreather is all working as it's supposed to.
Not a rebreather expert.
Just pay attention to the clear water. The clear water.
It's pretty nice. It's a bedding plane there to start out with, but as they went through,
it was clear.
Yeah, it's clear. It's nice.
Yeah. And this is the dive line that Martin had made almost 10 years previous. So that is a piece of interesting information, saying that it's not a rip current of glacial meltwater that comes through here in the summer.
Low flow.
And here we're going to have a fuss with the
lights.
The lights.
Yeah.
Okay. Also, so this is just a note. So now there's silt in here and stuff, but there is also these massive mill holes. So there was a time when this honked water and carried big rocks through with it, but it would not seem that it's active today.
Well, so that's the image of the far side.
Far side of the sump. Okay, so Martin had been here before. This is how far Martin got, but he was by himself. He didn't have time, and there was too high risk to dekit. So now finally there's two cavers. They can get out to the other side. So they get out and they surveyed 65 meters of passage. It's looking good, but they were surveying in their diving dry suits. So it starts out 30 meters of nice walking passage, and then it got into fissure, and then it got a bit tighter Vados passage. So it keeps going, but it was a bit snaggy, and they didn't want to risk their dry suits, which is reasonable given that they had almost an hour dive to get back again. So it's left in a very curious position for next time. That's gonna need to involve dekitting fully and caving beyond.
But it goes.
Yeah. And then one of the other good things about this was this was the map beforehand when you're just like, there's a survey problem and I don't know whose survey is worse. So we fixed that this time. Yay, it all makes sense. And here is the full map when they finish. So they get into the water, immediately drop down a big drop, and then it's pretty much straight bedding plane, a little air bow, and then it rises up. And
there's a couple underwater leads, but that rift at the end, I think, is still kind of the primary focus. Yeah, it goes.
Oh, okay.
All right.
So once we got these divers all set up and ready to get in the water, there was 6 of us who went deeper into the cave to do mostly resurveying and a little bit of collection objectives. So we got a little bit of speleophems for Rockies, the Rocky Mountains. We don't usually get that many formations. Castleguard is a much older cave than most of ours, and it has some really awesome formations along soda straws. And then these ones, so this soda straw here that had a giant flag and then started growing down and then started going, so there's just showing different airflow over time. And then this one over here got a little bit cut off, but so here's a big flag going one direction, and then here's this other one, big flag going the other direction. So we think that it's probably like that one is growing in the winter and then one is growing in the summer. But it could be that one grew at one time period and then something blocked off and the wind changed direction and something blew from the other direction for another 1,000 years. Don't totally know, but there's all kinds of things going all directions. And then also, so in here, this formation, this is right near the cubic ice pearl or cubic cave pearls. But so this deposit was dated to about 1 million years old, and then this redissolving acid shower happened about 50,000 years ago, which is maybe previous 2 ice ages.
Yeah, it's too bad we don't see the scale of it, but that thing's pretty big. I mean,
this is about 2 people tall, 3 people tall.
Yeah. All right.
And then so this is like classic fissure passage. So it's a bit unnerving, but there's only one way to do it, and that's to do it. But some is Catherine going like, I like this. And this is holes in the floor. Yeah, that was a mini hole. So just like, just use momentum and you shouldn't fall down. Oh.
All right.
Oh, okay. So. And then we made it to the ice plug, which is cool. Most of the exploration happened in the 70s and 80s, and so we're kind of losing a generation of knowledge. So we need to get more people back there in knowing this cave. So that was part of going here. And it's just super cool that you're traveling through and it's pretty warm, and then all of a sudden it changes character, and then you start getting you feel it getting cooler, and then you're near it, so like, oh, now we're close to the ice plug. So the iconic ice plug, here we go. Here's our team, and fooling around.
Yeah.
And then this is another ice plug. So there was actually many tendrils that hit underneath the Columbia Glacier. So we stopped here. And this had really different composition of ice, so it seems really sublimated. It's like a lattice, and it like super narrow. So I mean, I need to learn a little bit more about ice to figure out what the heck is happening with this. But we were here to collect soil samples. So a previous expedition by Brule University had identified that there's soil with bones. So we went in there and just got some baggies of that. This is super blurry, but the point of this is just saying this is where this ice plug is, way underneath. And we're 239 meters below the surface. So there is 239 meters of rock and then ice. I don't know the proportions of which, but the ice is way on top of us here. So that soil, I mean, it totally looks like if you were hiking along the side of a cliff and then just saw a little animal den, that's what it looks like, except for that's about 10,000 years old and has been covered by ice for quite a substantial amount of time.
Yeah. So basically there's like a pack rat nest underneath the Columbia ice field. Ancient marsupials or mammals or what? What do we think?
We think they are red squirrels because 10,000 years ago there was a forest on top of where that glacier is today. There was trees on top of that. And when we're skiing up on the Saskatchewan Glacier, sometimes there is random debris from an army training center in the 40s. And then sometimes, so you got to decipher between the random army debris and
2x4s and
it's a 2x4, yeah, like the wood, and then like the really cool wood is the ancient wood. So there's
petrified forest stuff. Yeah, logs.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. And so another part of our job was fixing cartographer's nightmare.
Yeah, so in 1980 they surveyed part of this Munchkin Peon Trail, and then in 1984 they surveyed from the other side and connected it, supposedly. When it was plotted, found a little bit of a survey error. So yeah, a bit of a loop error there that persisted since 1984. So it wasn't until this year that we actually were able to get back there and make a go of it. So between that and just having a fresh look at the data, here's the Munchkin Peon Trail north on the left-hand side. I don't know any cave where every single shot has the same inclination of -4. That was kind of a weird thing. And then this was the Swiss team that surveyed in 1987. I don't know how well you can read your compass and inclinometer, but I was never able to read it to 0.3 of a degree. So there was some suspect data.
I could. I'm so good at compass. Suspect data, but then go back to the original survey notes, and for which we don't have all of them, but we did have this stuff, and it turns out they did not measure 2 points.
Point anything of a degree. So anyways, between having that look at the data and resurveying in Munchkin Peon, we actually fixed it. So there's a 10-meter survey error there still, but in a 1 kilometer loop, that's a pretty good percentage, I think. So the end result of all the resurvey, the new survey by the divers, the cave is now 21.3 kilometers long, so not a huge increase, but just a little bit.
And end up a little bit deeper, right?
Yeah, actually there's a 4 meters deeper, so 388 meters depth total now. So yeah, it's a good result, and plus having a team of us, a new generation that has knowledge and interest in the cave, is we're kind of picking out some leads that might be worth another look.
Yeah, and then so the kind of the best part about caving and camping underground is getting out. And camping underneath a glacier, and you come out into blue skies and some pretty epic views. So Castleguard, yay. Oh, and then these guys, so there was a small team of us there for the whole time, and then a crew helped to come de-rig. They also brought some luxury food. They thought they would bring real food and show us up, like chumps eating freeze-dried. So here, they kind of think they were asking for sympathy, but they ain't getting none because they had chili and we were jealous.
You know, you can break those pieces up to make them a cook basket too.
That's true. Why stop now?
So they are supposed to be going caving, but and we're like, you just had a, but give me some. Okay, so this is our team at the end. Everybody put in a lot of effort, put up with minus 25 Celsius nights, and it's really some crappy, grovelly, crawling all over screed passage to get those tanks back and forth to the sump. So it's good effort, good team.
Yeah. Nice work to everybody involved, and yeah, Katie definitely planned the bulk of the trip and organized a whole bunch of these people. So thanks for that.
Yeah. And we had we got a flag from the Explorers Club. This is the same Explorers Club flag that went onto Mount Rainier in 1974, I believe. And so now it's been to Castleguard, and hopefully we'll get back there again.
Awesome. Well, I think that's the end of it. So thank you all for listening. And, you know, it's kind of an awesome thing that the convention's virtual because it meant that we could share this with you. So if you are interested in more, the Sid Peru 1973 Castleguard movie is on YouTube. So you can search that out along with some other information. If you just search Castleguard, there's some neat videos and things on YouTube and other places. So yeah. Hopefully you enjoyed this little slice of Canadian caving and a bit of the history involved with our longest cave.
Thank you.